outside of Cade Tyson, the Tar Heels haven't landed anyone in the transfer portal yet. So the question becomes, do you keep going after players right now, or do you wait to see who pulls out of the NBA draft?
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? It's Tuesday, May 14th, 2024. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Shade, and you're joining us at the place to get your Tar Heels content every day. Thanks for making us your first listen or watch, and I want to give a special shout out to all you everydayers out there, as well as all the members of the Locked On Tar Heels Discord community. We're so glad that you're here. Coming up on the show today, a couple developing stories that we need to discuss. There's some interesting questions with financials in the athletics department. An audit has been ordered, and there is a new Thanksgiving week MTE that is going to change the landscape of those Thanksgiving week tournaments. We'll get to all of that. The first thing we're going to talk about today is that Carolina's kind of in this weird limbo right now in terms of roster construction. But first, before all of that, I got to clear up something from yesterday's show. I think a few people misunderstood what I was saying about Kyle Filipowski and thought that I was saying that Jalen Washington and Ven-Allen Lubin are better basketball players than Kyle Filipowski. That is in no way what I was trying to say yesterday. I was saying that Duke struggled with Kyle Filipowski at the 5 last year defensively because that is not where he is first and foremost. My suggestion was that Carolina would be in a better place if you have Jalen Washington at the 5 or Lubin at a small ball 5 than with Flip for Duke. That's all I'm saying, is just that defensive side of things. Kyle Filipowski is a phenomenal basketball player. I just don't want to make sure we have that clear, that to clear up what I was saying and what I was not saying. Okay. It is Tuesday. We're not going to get to a Trivia Tuesday question because of all these various news stories today that are, I think, critically important to get to, and we got a lot to talk about. So I want to hit the ground running. Let's get it. This first segment actually comes from a mailbag question from DLion90 on the Discord. DLions90 says this: should UNC wait until the draft combine is over and players pull out of the draft process, or go ahead and try to land players right now? I think this is a great question to ask. The context of this, let's think back, is that outside of Cade Tyson, Carolina has not yet landed anyone else, and we know just by looking at who they're targeting that they really, really want to get some front court help, and they have not yet done so. And so D-Lion's question here is a great one. Do you wait till the withdrawal deadline or till guys pull out, or do you go after people now? So let me set the scene for you. Today is Tuesday, May 14th. The deadline for guys to pull out of the NBA draft and come back to school, assuming they had maintained eligibility and could transfer to North Carolina if they enter the transfer portal. That's a key thing. If a guy's not in the transfer portal, he can't come to Carolina. The only player that could come to Carolina not in the transfer portal is Harrison Ingram, and it doesn't seem like he's coming back. So that deadline is May 29th, which is 10 days after the combine ends on May 19th, 5 days from now. So that gives us, from as we're talking today, 15 days. So just over 2 weeks before that deadline. And in when you think 2 weeks, that's not much time, but in transfer portal time, that's like 8 decades, right? So much can happen in that time span. So the question is, can you afford to wait, or do you need to pull the trigger right now? For me, at this point, pulling the trigger on somebody that's just in the portal and not also in the NBA draft or going through that process, like a Ven-Allen Lubin, for example, who starts his campus visit today. We'll keep our eyes on that. At this point, pulling the trigger on somebody like him is interesting because it's this weird limbo, this weird middle ground of you didn't get a Jonas Aidoo or a Cliff Omoruyi or Oumar Ballo, guys like that, a straight up portal guy who wasn't examining the NBA draft process. So a lot of that wave of players is gone. And now you've got what's potentially a really strong wave of players coming back, because guys that are in the NBA draft process and the combine process right now, those are pretty much guys that you want to be on your roster, assuming they're the right fit and everything that Coach Davis is looking for. I get that. I hear that. But right now, you're kind of like, the only people I would say you go after right now are guys that you look at and it's like, that's my dude. That's who I want on this team. Let's get him. If you're just settling for right now, as Coach Rob talked about last week on the show, don't panic, don't settle. Don't settle for somebody right now just because he's available and there might be 10 more guys that you could land when they come out of the draft. And so I think part of that not panicking, not settling is remembering this, for example. Just because you've missed on a couple of those guys doesn't mean necessarily that you're going to land in a worse possession, in a worse spot than you found yourself in. Let me give you this example. I thought that after Jonas Aidoo's visit to Baylor, there was about a week where I was like, oh, Jonas Aidoo is going to be a Baylor Bear. That's done. We got to turn our attention now to Cliff Omoruyi. That's how I felt. Well, they too lost out on Jonas Aidoo. He ultimately went to Arkansas. But instead, their consolation prize was that they landed Norchad Omier from Miami. All due respect to Jonas Aidoo, give me Norchad Omier every day of the week over Jonas Aidoo, and I'll go to war with you over that one if you disagree. And it's fine. I'd love to have those kind of conversations. But Baylor lands in a better spot because Jonas Aidoo didn't pick them. So sometimes you wind up in a better place. So to me, part of the answer to the question here from D Lions is why it's so critically important to know your team as it is right now, what you need, what you're still trying to get. You have to know what pieces you want. You got to know what pieces you have. And then the ones you want, you got to go hunt them down. If they're out there right now in the transfer portal, awesome. Pay their price, get them to campus, and let's get them on the roster. If not, if you don't see that player out there, then you probably need to risk waiting. So what do you ultimately do? What's the answer? Well, let me look at both sides of the coin, and then I'll give you a if it's me. On the pull the trigger now side of things, as I said, if that guy's available now, perfect, get him. If the staff have decided that Ven-Allen Lubin is their dude, that's who they want, then they should not allow him to leave this Chapel Hill visit without committing. That's what needs to happen. But the question becomes, I often think about this. Are you willing to take a guy that might be, let's say, 3% worse as a basketball player? We're just speaking hypotheticals, but I'm putting specific numbers on it. If player A is 3% worse than player B, but player A is available now and player B might not pull out of the draft or might not choose us if he does. Player A, who's 3% worse, guaranteed to come to Carolina, guaranteed Carolina guy. What's your threshold of how much less percent you would take for that guarantee of like, we're getting this guy and we're not waiting? That's something that coaching staffs are going to have to wrestle with, right? Like that's part of the waiting game. Also, how much risk are you willing to take on? How much whisk are you willing to take on to wait? And it's like, okay, this dude is 5% worse than the guy in the draft. We're going to take our chances and wait. There's a calculated risk involved in that decision. But keep in mind, it is guaranteed that this is RJ Davis's last year. I don't want to take risk on. I don't want to wait around. I want to get dudes that want to be at Carolina, that want to be part of this roster, and are going to fight like heck to make this team awesome. So there's all that. That's on the pull the trigger now side. On the wait to see who comes out because they're probably the supreme talent side, it could be worth the wait. Could is the critical word there. What if he doesn't come out? What if he picks a different school? Here's what I would say about NIL and waiting for guys to come out of the NBA draft. Hear me on this. You ready? It's great to have a bag, but what if you're left holding it? Money is just paper if you can't spend it. Does that make sense? It's great to have a nice NIL collective pot to be able to spend, but if that pot's just sitting there deteriorating, that's all it's good for. So if you got money, spend it. I'm not about like, yes, you want to get guys that want to be here, but you got to spend money to get them. Like that's part of the deal. So that's what you got to look at with the waiting to see who comes out. But if you feel good and confident that you can secure that player, wait, by all means, absolutely wait. So if it's me, here's what I would do. Right now, the Tar Heels have 3 scholarships left. They've used 10 of them. I would only use 2, and then I would give the third remaining one to a non-scholarship level player, one of the walk-ons. I would go ahead and, like, if you're in the stock market, you know how you do dollar cost averaging. If you pay too much for a stock and then it starts coming down, well, then you go ahead and buy more of that stock so it averages out, and then the actual price you paid is somewhere in between. I would spend one of my scholarships right now. I'd go ahead and if that's Ven-Allen Lubin, and if you decided that's who you want, awesome. Grab him. Let's get him locked in. And then you wait to see who's the best dude for us. That's a critical word, for us, best fit that we can get that decides to come back to college. If that's Coleman Hawkins, if that's Jameer Watkins, whoever it is, don't let that dude slip out the door. If that's Ugonna Onyenso and that's who you want, get him. So I would use one now and I would save one. That way and that doesn't work every year, but that makes sense in the context of this year's roster building. That's how I'd play it. And keep in mind, again, don't get left holding a bag, because supply and demand's a real thing here. A couple weeks ago, Oumar Ballo went for just over $1 million to Indiana. And at the time, I was like, oh boy, that's a lot of money. Today, you would love that. Great Osborne just went for $2 million to stay with his coach up to Washington and Danny Sprinkle. So $1 million's feels like chump change right now. You got to figure out what you need to spend and then go do it. Speaking of spending, we got another conversation to have. Is the athletics department in some financial trouble? The Board of Trustees is out here demanding an audit. But oh, by the way, Bubba Cunningham is not even in Chapel Hill right now. What is going on? We'll have that conversation in just a second. Right after I tell you about LinkedIn, when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, which has the right tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just some job board. It helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't even really searching for a job, but they might just be open to that perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make this process easier for you. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making that process so much quicker. So post your job for free right now at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Again, that's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Conference realignment is back on the table, as it seems to be every summer. But right now, it's tied up with some interesting budget questions about the Carolina Athletics Department. In an article published on WRAL on Monday from Brian Murphy, the sports investigative journalist, the article is titled, quote, UNC trustees critical of Bubba Cunningham to review athletic department amid budget concerns, end quote. The lead reads, quote, the UNC Board of Trustees approved an audit of the school's athletic department Monday morning amid concerns and anger over the Tar Heels' revenue, management, and changes to college sports, end quote. So basically what's going to happen is the board has closed meetings Wednesday and Thursday of this week. They've approved budget line, all that stuff, but they want to have more conversation with Bubba Cunningham, who had been reached for comment, didn't give comment, but did confirm that he would be there on Thursday. So basically what's going on right now is the preliminary budget proposal, according to the article, shows that the budget for fiscal year 24-25 is going to be operating at a $17 million deficit. That is a lot. And so basically the Board of Trustees is like, look, if you got no plans to take care of this thing, we are in a pickle and we can't figure that out. Now, part of this is going back to COVID. Bubba Cunningham had been saying, look, there are going to be deficits. We, as the University of North Carolina, basically are committed to maintaining our 28 athletic varsity sports. I love that personally. I love that the athletics department is doing that, but they made the choice to not cut and save money by doing so. And because of where the ACC is right now and the way things are going in the college sports landscape, it puts Carolina's athletics budget in a weird place. And so all of these kind of go together. But here's the problem. The trustees are doing all of this. Guess where Bubba Cunningham is right now? Not in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. He's down in Florida for the ACC Spring meetings. So right as he's gone, the Board of Trustees calls for this audit. Is that timing on purpose? I don't know. They haven't come right out and said it, but come on. What are we doing here? But again, he will be back up for Thursday. So what does this all ultimately boil down to? It feels to me like less of an issue with Bubba Cunningham, because personally, hand up, I think Bubba Cunningham has done and is doing a great job with everything he's navigated, with the way he's leading North Carolina through things, with the success of the on-field and on-court progress of teams. I'm here for it. But I recognize that the state of things is just wacky and wild across collegiate athletics. What this ultimately all boils down to for me is the ACC's lack of revenue and how it causes North Carolina as an individual entity to not have much margin to operate. To me, that is the bottom line issue. From trustee Dave Bolek, he says in the article, quote, Carolina's ability to maintain excellence at a high level is going to require a really prudent budgeting and revenue models and potential cost cutting. See what I'm saying? That's all that I just talked about. A lot of it is due to the revenue or lack thereof revenue that we're not receiving from the ACC deal, end quote. Bolek goes on to advocate for a higher revenue for joining, a higher revenue league. Quote, I am advocating for that. That's what we need to do. We need to do everything we can to get there. Or the alternative is the ACC is going to have to reconstruct itself. I think all options are on the table, end quote. John Swofford, in signing that deal, really put the ACC in a strange spot when the ACC network was announced back in 2016. That's when the grant of rights, the agreement with ESPN was extended 9 years through 35-36. I went back and read that article. The end of it says this. Swofford said the many agreements will put the ACC in the upper echelon of Power 5 conferences, hear this, and secure the league's future over the next 20 years. Yikes. That's just not the case. And so that's where things are at. So again, today we're just beginning this conversation. So I'm just trying to give you a few bits and pieces of it, tell you where I'm at with it. And then obviously it's going to continue to unfold throughout the summer and we'll update and talk about it. So it seems to me like the bottom line advocacy from the Board of Trustees is either one, a new league, meaning SEC or Big Ten probably, or number two, a better or / reconstructed ACC, whatever that looks like. Well, duh, that's what you want to do. Is a reconstructed better ACC tenable at this point in time? I don't have the answer to that yet. Today, if you have, force me to give you an answer, I would say no, but that breaks my heart. And so I'd love to see it happen. So to me, there are two issues at play here. At first glance, the hot take that everyone's looking at and everyone was talking about on Monday was, has AD Bubba Cunningham managed the budget well? Has he, done things incorrectly? Has he not done well? So that on the surface is issue number one. Issue number two, though, is ultimately, to me, this is the bigger issue. It's not Bubba Cunningham. Bigger issue is number two. Is the pool of money he's been given to work with big enough? And that's an issue of the ACC, not of Bubba Cunningham or the University of North Carolina or the athletics department as a whole. So bottom line for me, whether or not Bubba has mismanaged the funds or the budget, whatever, there's just not enough margin right now. And that can only be achieved through more income, through more revenue. And you got to find a way to do that. And so the Board of Trustees, it's clear from that quote, is going to look at things like potential cost cutting, which could mean getting rid of some sports. I hope not. Other budgeting, tightening, other revenue models. If we can't get out to a different conference, we got to do something. So everything's on the table here. That's what we're watching for. So not only us as Carolina people, but I think from what I gather from talking to fellow Locked On hosts at other schools and conference hosts, things like that. Everyone is watching North Carolina really closely, and here's why. Number one, because North Carolina appears to me to be the linchpin in this whole thing. Because number one, here we go. They are the top expansion target of both the Big Ten and the SEC because of the totality of Carolina's athletic department, not just football, not just basketball, but everything. And then number two, because the Tar Heels are a key founding member of the ACC and are very critical to keeping that conference together, if Carolina chooses to stay and fight, that signals great things for the ACC. If they choose to go because they're so desirable to one of these other two conferences, that's great for the Tar Heels. And ultimately, we love the ACC, but the Tar Heels got to do what the Tar Heels got to do. And so they're going to look at that. But whatever the choice of those two things are going to either signify some really positive or negative things for the ACC and some really positive, hopeful things for another conference. Ultimately, again, whatever's best for the University of North Carolina. And I don't mean the entire UNC statewide system. I just mean UNC Chapel Hill. That's all I care about, with all due respect to all those other schools. The Tar Heels is what matters. And I say that to say, last point on this for today, and then we'll get into another conversation. UNC, because of things that changed earlier this year, now has to get permission from the UNC Systems Board of Governors and the UNC System President if it wants to switch leagues. Keep in mind, NC State's wagon has essentially been hitched to North Carolina's, and that is an anchor that's going to not... I don't mean it to sound like NC State's an anchor. I just mean it to sound like you don't get to act autonomously now because the Board of Governors has tied NC State to you. And so I'm just interested to see at the government, political, legislative, whatever you want to say, level, how this is going to play out if North Carolina ultimately decides, the Board of Trustees, that it's in their best interest to move on. The Board of Governors has veto power. What's that going to look like? That could get messy, even more lawsuits. So clearly tons more to talk about this, but it's going to start right within the athletics department with Bubba Cunningham in the Board of Trustees. We'll see what happens there. Now, that's not the only big national college sports news of the day that I want to talk about. The other specifically relates to college basketball, where the Players Era Festival is a Thanksgiving week, feast week, multi-team event that is about to revolutionize those Thanksgiving week tournaments. And even Maui, the Maui Invitational, yes, is going to be left out in the cold if they don't adapt and adjust. What's that mean? We'll talk about it in just a second. There have been rumors of an NIL-based MTE multi-team event going back to March. I believe it was Front Office Sports. I want to try to give credit. Always, we want to make sure to give credit to the right people that first kind of brought this to light. I believe it was back in March. But over the weekend, on Saturday, there's reporting from CBS Sports' Matt Norlander and Dennis Dodd to give us more detail and information about a concrete event that is happening this year, this Thanksgiving week, that will take place in Las Vegas with games on November 26, 27, and 29, taking Thanksgiving Day off. What's it called? This is the Players Era Festival. It's going to take place again over Feast Week. Here's the kicker. Each participating team is going to get $1 million for their NIL collective, which the collective will then disperse to the various student athletes. They will have requirements to fill because, again, this can't be pay for play. They've got to do things to fulfill whatever for the entity, like autograph signings, social media posts, whatever it is. It's also, these guys are reporting that the champion or champions, depending on how this goes, and I'll explain more about that in a second, will get an additional payout with the exact number not yet known, but it sounds like it might be another $1 million to that school or schools who win this thing. So that's pretty wild. The Players Era Festival, it's going to take place at T-Mobile Arena, Michelob Ultra Arena, MGM Garden Grand, all properties that are tied together. There are 8 teams in it for this first year. Yes, first year, because it's expected to continue on, and that's telling you something right there. It's going to be an 8-team field. We had 7 of them locked in. And then over the weekend, this is where the reporting really came in, is that the 8th team has now joined. So the original 7 that we knew of were Alabama, Houston, Texas A&M, Oregon, San Diego State, Notre Dame, and Rutgers. And then over the weekend, it was announced that Creighton becomes the 8th team to join. And Creighton's joining of this event is what signals to me that this is groundbreaking and is going to change the face of these Feast Week events. Here's why. Creighton was slated to be in Battle for Atlantis this upcoming year. Right now, I don't know if you've looked around the landscape of these MTEs, but Maui is the tip top. It's the one. Battle for Atlantis is number 2. That's how I read the MTEs right now, that it's Maui's number 1, Battle for Atlantis number 2, and then others below that. But Creighton was scheduled to be in the Battle for Atlantis. They are leaving Battle for Atlantis. They weren't, cajoled. They're not being paid. Creighton is buying themselves out of Battle for Atlantis so they can come be part of this event, and also have signed a 3-year deal to be part of it, a 3-year commitment. If that doesn't tell you everything you need to know right there about the power that an NIL-based MTE will hold, you're blind to what's going on in college athletics right now. This is a clear signal of the changing landscape that's going to affect everything. You might love it, you might hate it, but this is what it is, and this is where we're at. Now, the reason I say we need to talk more about the 3-year commitment is regulations from the NCAA say that you cannot participate in the same MTE except for once every 4 years. So how can they sign a 3-year commitment to this? Well, what it sounds like is Players Era is going to create multiple smaller MTEs all within this same thing, so that, for example, Creighton could compete in one of those this year, the other one next year, and so on and so on. So what it sounds like is going to happen is these 8 teams are going to be divided up into 2 separate MTEs this year: Bama, Houston, Notre Dame, and Rutgers in one, Creighton, Oregon, San Diego State, and Texas A&M in the other. So it sounds like we'll have 2. I guess they'll probably just do round robin, and the two winners will receive that extra money. Now, here's the other thing. They're already talking about next year, 2025, where it's expected to expand up to 16 teams. And not only is it telling that Creighton has left Battle for Atlantis to come to this, but it's like Alabama, Houston, those are some teams right at the top of college basketball right now, but no true blue bloods in this list until you look at the list for next year that has been connected to the event. Nobody else confirmed yet, but connected. Duke, Gonzaga, Kansas, Syracuse, Michigan, Virginia. All of those schools have been connected. So what it means for the Tar Heels, whom, keep in mind, Hubert Davis has already been talking about getting Carolina out of the Maui rotation. The Tar Heels cannot get left behind here. Again, we're already kind of concerned about being left behind by being in the ACC. We're already concerned about being left behind by not spending this offseason in the transfer portal. You can't also get left behind by not being part of an NIL-based MTE that's going to give your players extra money by just going to play basketball games, and even more so if they win them. Carolina's got to get in on these. Now, here's the thing for me. This to me is going to be I'm just saying it right now. I'm going to go ahead and own it and claim it. I think this is the future of college basketball MTEs during Feast Week. Everyone has to go to this NIL-based model, or they're going to die. Adapt or die, basically, right, is what we're looking at. That's what I think has to happen. So Maui, you want to survive, you got to find a way for this to be your model. Battle for Atlantis, same thing. Everyone else. Because if a high-profile team like Creighton is already buying their way out of Atlantis, it's just going to continue to happen. Because why wouldn't, as long as it's NCAA compliant and everything from the reporting from CBS suggests that it is, coaches would, all of them want to be in this. Every player wants to be in this. So let's go make it happen. The thing is, how is it sustainable from a financial model? They're going to have to figure that out, but that's on the MTVs. That's not on the players and coaches. They just show up, sign their contract, and then get paid for playing. That's all it is. Now, another interesting thing is the TV rights side of this. As of their reporting, the broadcast rights have not yet been formally secured, But they suggest the expectation is that it's not going to be over linear TV like ESPN, but rather is going to be bought by a primary streaming service. So we'll have to wait and see what's going to go on with that, because that's another signaling of where the landscape is heading. So again, just like with the athletics department budget conversation, I just want to make you all aware of what's going on and what's coming up and how the Tar Heels have to be involved in this kind of thing, or they're going to get left behind. You hate it. Money's driving it all. But if you want to be in the game, you can't get left holding a bag or looking for a bag. That's where it's at. Lots more to come tomorrow. Coach Pat Kilby's going to join me. We'll have a great conversation. Coach Rob later in the week, and then we'll get you out into the weekend on Friday. If you haven't already subscribed to the show on audio and video, super easy to do. If you're not already part of the Locked On Tar Heels Discord community, we'd love to have you. Come for the Tar Heels, stay for the community. We got a guy in there, his name's Steven, just killing it, making this Discord awesome. It's so rad, and plenty more to come. The link's in the show notes. It's free to join. Best of all, it's a great community. You guys, I want to remind you, as always, it's a great day to be a Tar Heel. We're going to talk again tomorrow. But until then, peace.